You've teamed up with some of your esteemed colleagues and scholars to write a new book about a very turbulent year in Canadian history and politics. 1968 in Canada is the name of the book, A Year and Its Legacies, and certainly, much like in the U.S. in 1968, what a year of turmoil and change. 50 years later now, as you look back on that year, how significant was that in Canadian history?
It was, and this is not an overstatement to say that it was the most singularly important year since the founding of Canada in 1867. The reason for that, and you're quite right to point out that 68, globally speaking, whether you're talking the United States, you're talking around the world, was a tumultuous year. In Canada, it was when myself and a couple of good friends, Michael Hawes and Andrew Holman, got together to talk about this. We realized that, gee whiz, when you look across themes and issues, whether it's the Canadian healthcare system, whether it's the Official Languages Act, whether it's questions dealing with Indigenous peoples, whether it's the question of Arctic sovereignty, whether it's the question of Canada-US relations, and so on and so forth, that 68 was a seminal year in Canadian history, more important arguably than anything other than 1867, as I say. So we decided, what we did was we brought together a pool of colleagues, and we partnered with the Canadian Museum of History in Gatineau, Quebec. We did an author's workshop, 2-day seminar there, and then we subsequently said, we think we have a really good book project here. And that took about a year plus to get in shape, and we selected a handful of essays, a couple of which are also en français, and it's turned out to be a wonderful project.
Politically, the year that Pierre Trudeau was elected Prime Minister.
And the year that René Lévesque and the Parti Québécois, the sovereigntist movement in Quebec emerges, absolutely. You could go through, if you, setting aside the standard Canadian tropes of hockey and other things like that, you can go through a list, and it's nonstop, that year for Canada. And it's, the thing about it is we asked our authors not simply to look at this in a static way, which was, yes, we wanted to know what took place in 68 on your particular area or topic, why it took place, but what have been the lasting impacts. And much to our delight, our authors, our contributors to this book, took that charge in earnest and said, it's not just I'm going to write one little simple paragraph. I'm going to take a look at this and see how that's impacted for the past 30, 40 years now. So.
And collectively, the authors say that no segment of Canadian life was left unchanged by the events of 1968.
It's true. I mean, apart from the fact that the Toronto Maple Leafs won the Stanley Cup in '67 and haven't won it since, as one of my friends pointed out, the fact is that everything from urbanization to the emerging policy of which is a cornerstone of Canadian society, multiculturalism, to women's rights, 68 was a pivotal year in so many respects.
And environmentally, you write, you focused on Ottawa's response to the discovery of oil and the threat of transporting that oil, the threat it could pose to the environment, the problems that could potentially be there, especially along the coast.
Right.
And here we are 50 plus years later, and still the talk of how to move oil around Canada, whether by train or how to get the oil from Alberta to where it needs to go.
Yeah, that was such an overwhelming concern for the government of Canada when oil was discovered in July of '68 in Prudhoe Bay, and it was clear that American authorities wanted to move this oil, and the question was, how do you move the oil? And there were all kinds of prospects being looked at. Do you send a reinforced tanker through the Northwest Passage with oil to the East Coast? Do you do you build a pipeline from across to Valdez and then send it by tanker, or do you do a transcontinental pipeline? Canada was especially concerned about because of the relative fragility and the relative beauty of the waters of the Canadian North and along the west coast of Canada, that what happened subsequently with the Exxon Valdez would happen in Canadian waters, right? And you can go back and you can look at cabinet minute meetings, and you can look at letters from the Secretary of the Environment or External Affairs, or op-ed pieces that appeared in the Canadian Globe and Mail, and they specifically point to the fact that they are, given the fact that these waters are pristine effectively, and that your response time and your ability to contain a major oil spill was non-existent. They were just concerned beyond belief, and remain concerned to this day, that that would happen. So, you know, the Canadian government says, well, maybe what you should do is build a Mackenzie Valley pipeline, and we'll work with you on that. But the Nixon administration was solidly focused on building the Trans-Alaska pipeline to Valdez and sending it by tanker down the coast of Washington State. So, yeah.
1968 in Canada, a year and its legacies. Chris Kirkey, thank you as always for taking the time to be with us.
Tom, my pleasure. I'm very pleased to be here today. Thank you.